So, hello everybody, this is Kiara here. I wanted to just share briefly my current understandings of the Tattwas. So, this is part of the Kashmir Shaivism system where the self experiences itself in all of creation rather than separate from creation or beyond creation or transcending creation. So, in that case, if creator can be experienced within creation, how does this happen? Why isn't this being evident in our daily experience as humans or as other species or as planetary beings or galactic creatures? Why are we experiencing ourselves so limited, separate, and disconnected? If the universe is a hologram and each of us is part of this hologram, why aren't we experiencing ourselves as the universe? What holds us back? What are the chains, the veils that keep us separated? As we know, separation is an illusion. The idea, the sense of separation is an illusion. And yet there is a multiplicity within creation. And what Kashmir Shaivism is about is that this multiplicity does not have to mean duality, does not have to mean separation. This multiplicity can be a stage, a beautiful play of consciousness, where Creator as consciousness, as Satchitananda, primordial self, is still conscious of itself within the multiplicity of creation, within all the realms and dimensions of creation, physical, etheric, causal, the subtle worlds, the astral worlds. And so what the tattvas are about, it's like a structure. It's a periodic table. It's a passage through which creator consciousness, as what is referred to as Parashiva or Brahman or primordial consciousness or Satchitananda or universal self, just transpose these words, where universal self can be experienced as the personal self without any loss of identity, which means basically without being referenced by a single location in time, a single location in space, a single differentiation of personality structure, a single identification as personal self. So when this veil of Maya begins to dissolve, we experience the omniscience of all things. All knowledge is available to us, and therefore we're not limited in what we can learn or understand or express or achieve within this incarnational story. We experience ourselves as omnipotent. We're not limited in terms of our siddhis, our abilities, our powers. We're not limited in time and space. We experience ourselves as omnipresent. So what the Shaivites refer to as Parashiva, this is primordial consciousness. This can be experienced through all the tattvas. The tattvas are like the elements of creation. So, even looking at it from a scientific perspective, the Big Bang isn't the beginning of creation. It's the beginning of what we experience as physical creation, which is basically the lowest level of the tattvas, the Mahabhutas. These 5 Mahabhutas what we call the elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Ether is the plasma. The physical universe is 99 point something percent plasma, which then objectifies, intensifies, and experiences itself through the grosser elements of air and fire and water and earth. So all of these elements and all the permutations and combinations and interactions is the physical universe. Uh, the physical universe is one of many universes, or we should say the physical etheric universe, because it includes the fifth element of ether or plasma, which leads us into the experience of the subtler senses. Um, the lower elements are explored through the physical senses. The etheric realm is explored through the etheric senses, which then opens the doorway into the astral worlds and the subtle um, sense expressions. So here we have the physical world, the physical universe. The Big Bang that we refer to is the beginning of this universe. But beyond that, this is just the five bottommost layers of creation, the Mahabhutas, as they call it, these five elements. Then you have the reflection of that, the Tanmantras, in the astral world. So just as you have the five physical um, elements, you have five astral elements. So this is what are the precursor, the template for the creation of the physical elements and the physical universes. So here we're talking about, in our definition, we're talking about going beyond third dimensional reality into fourth, and then fourth maybe the lower astral realms, and then the higher astral realms from the fifth on beyond to whatever your belief system may hold about how many dimensions or worlds or lokas exist within this particular creation. So there we are. So we're experiencing as above, so below. Here on the physical and on the astral, the earthly and the heavenly. And they're reflections of each other. Um, we are limited through conditioning to experience the physical world and the astral causal worlds through very limited perceptions. So in the Shaiva tradition, they refer to perceptions as jnanendras. The organs of perception are, the skin, the ears, the eyes, the nose to smell, tongue to taste. And these perceptions are not talking about simply physical tastes and physical sounds and sights and, fragrances and touch. We're also talking about the astral world and astral senses, causal worlds and causal senses. And all of this we get to explore in our dream states or in a deep sleep. And after we leave this physical body to enter the afterlife, to cross dimensions, to move through different worlds, to gain awareness, to fractally remember who we are. So the tattvas are like a passage, an understanding. So we open up these subtle senses. We open up to the interconnectedness between the worlds. We experience as above, so below, within the body, within the mind, the different layers and realms of the mind. Uh, we begin to create a body of light, a mind of light. We begin to integrate the higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, the overmind, the supermind, extending beyond time space creation, experiencing beyond the veil of Maya, going all the way into source consciousness, the mind of God, entering that through the veils, through the so-called limitations called kanchukas, into these realms. Um, so the karmendras are these physical or motor senses, organs of agency, creation. The Jnanendras are the internal senses, the organs of perception. But we're not just talking about human siddhis or human senses. We're talking about senses and siddhis in general. Humans reflect one small slice in this immense spectrum of experience. So, human senses, our sense of touch, sight, vision, fragrance, and hearing, is a very small part of what these senses are capable of, what the universe is capable of in discovering itself. So the play of consciousness is the universe discovering itself through all these senses, physical and subtle, through all these worlds, physical, astral, causal, through all these realms and states, and finally experiencing itself beyond the veil of Maya. Now, what is Maya? Maya is the lens, the prism through which Creator is experienced within creation. In some traditions, it's referred to as illusion. It's not an illusion, it's simply the agency. It's like when light passes through a prism and creates the rainbows. And that is the multiplicity of possibilities. So you have 7 colors, 7 rays of light, you have various expressions and worlds, you have infinite forms of life. All this entering through the lens of Maya. And so what we have is Satchitananda, creator consciousness, reflected as Shiva Shakti, the pure consciousness itself, and then the awareness of consciousness, which is Shakti, which is then the first spark of the creative will entering into the world of creation. So this is before going through the veils of Maya. In this realm of creation, we, all that is, experience ourselves indivisible and unified. The idea of duality hasn't entered yet. And even a physical version of the universe hasn't been manifested. This is still prior to the so-called Big Bang. And so the self, this universal self, Satchitananda, being as conscious of itself, expressing itself in this infinite creative bliss. This is then reveals itself in 3 ways. If the focus is on I am that. So this is in the Hebrew tradition, I am that I am. And then the next variation on this is all this out there, this entire universe. So the focus is on the multiplicity, but within the multiplicity, I am. So the focus in the first Sadashiva is a focus on I as universal consciousness permeate all of creation. The second, Ishvara, is all this creation is essentially oneself. And subtle variations in identity. And the third is Shuddha Vidya, the true knowledge of the self permeating creation as creator. And once I experience this, then I recognize that I am all of that. We're talking about the qualities of creator, omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, um, this is available to us here and now. So when we pass through the veils of Maya, that forgetfulness takes place. So on the way down, universal consciousness seems to forget itself as it diversifies into multiplicity of creation. On the way up, this is the cycle of involution, the creation, uh, Shiva opening its eyes into life, existence. The second is evolution, return, or closing the eyes of Shiva, all things returning back into itself. So this whole cycle, the cycle of creation, dissolution, it can be seen as a long-term cycle of universes, the creation and dissolution of universes, or it could be the passage of every single moment. Doesn't matter, because when we go beyond the kanchukas, the chains, we recognize that they're not any separate from each other. Whether we're looking at infinite cycles of time, whether we're talking about infinite, what's it called? Well, the reverse infinity of time, where each moment becomes a universe. We're still in time, we're still in linear time. And so once we pass this passage on the way up in the return journey, passing through these kanchikas, we recognize that we're not in time or space in the way that we have perceived it. We go beyond the limitations of time and space, the limitations of where we experience ourselves in only one place, in only one time, and therefore everything becomes limited in terms of one expression as one individualized entity, where we experience one area of expertise or knowledge, um, where we experience one individualized personal self. All these kanchukas begin to dissolve, and essentially that para Brahman, para Shiva, para Shakti, whatever we call it, universal consciousness, begins to permeate through the veils of Maya, enters into these fields of creation, whether we call them dimensions or densities or realms or lokas, different causal, astral, physical, etheric worlds. We experience the self in all of that. And that self, like Satchitananda, is both universal and personal, is both um, beyond time, space, form, and it's within every atom of creation, within every individualized structure. Everything is fractally and holographically awake and aware of itself as the one. So as we have entered this veil of creation, we still experience ourselves in the multiplicity of creation, but we do not experience ourselves as the unity beyond the multiplicity. As this divine presence, I am, enters into creation through the veils, experiences itself without the kanchikas, then as above, so below, we experience ourselves through all the mirrors of creation. So I am Parashiva. I am then creating the first expression of itself as Shiva Shakti, which then, through the power of will, Icha Shakti, creates a form, a structure, Jnana Shakti, through which creation can happen, Kriya Shakti. And this creation takes place through these veils, the kanchukas of Maya, Kriya Shakti. And this creation takes place through these veils, the kanchukas of Maya, on the way down. And so we have multiplicity, we have self, the ahamkara. So we have the expression of Shiva Shakti reflected as Purusha and Prakriti, reflected as Purusha and Prakriti. So now this is a slightly different um, pairing. Shiva Shakti is infinite, universal. Um, Purusha Prakriti, um, Purusha Prakriti, here we have the individuation, the sense of individual self. And then there's the objective reality. And then there's the objective reality. So there's subjective and objective based on individual persona, the spark of creator as a spark, the Atman, which then enters into incarnation, grows, evolves, develops a psychic being, becomes conscious of itself, and returns back to source, to its recognition as source. So it's not a linear progression. I am here and I will be there. It's a progression of awareness, of recognition of who I am. I always already have been all that is. I just haven't been aware of all that is in human form and structure. And so this journey back in our evolution is about that recognition. So these 36 tattvas, so you have the Mahabhutas, the physical worlds, the Tanmantras, the astral worlds, the um, Jnanendriya, the Karmendriya, which are the organs of sense and organs, well, the organs of perception and the motor organs of action. So everything that we're capable of accomplishing through our divine omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, that as we transcend these veils, as we overcome those chains, the kanchukas of limitation, divine consciousness permeates, Shiva Shakti permeates through the Purusha Prakriti polarity into the sense of personal identity, the ahamkara, I am this human expression. For most of us, the ahamkara, the sense of personal self, is so strong that it occludes the jivatman, the psychic being, or the divine self. But here now what's happening is ahamkara is being irradiated, you could say, with the manas, the mental aspects, the buddhi, the causal aspects of the self, and all these different levels of soul and mind and body are becoming unified through the person self. So here now we have, as Rumi says, there's 3 stages. First you have the drop experiencing itself as separate from the ocean, and you experience this great longing, desire for merging. All the personal needs that we have for this and that and the other, the addictions we form, the attachments we create, are all because of this urge for return, to move beyond the idea of the person self, the separation within the person self, the duality inherent within the personal self, and begin to merge back into that unity. So the physical etheric body expands out into the subtle astral bodies, out into the causal bodies, out beyond the psychic self and soul aspect of our being, into the past the veil of Maya, into that essential identity of Shiva and Shakti as that which permeates all the universes and is the self I am. So, so the understanding of how all these kanchukas mirror and reflect within each other. It's like the Hindu metaphor of Indra's net, where they say that the universe is like a string of pearls, where each pearl reflects every other pearl. Each pearl is every other pearl. So the same Shiva consciousness. And don't confuse Shiva with the later version of Shiva, which had a form. Um, this is referring to the formless aspect. That's the Parashiva aspect. You can call it Brahman. You can call it the universe. You can call it God. That Shiva becomes that aspect of our divine self. That knowledge of self permeates through all the elements or principles of creation, all the tattvas. And once we integrate this knowledge all the way through, we understand that this physical body experience, um, experiencing itself through these elemental densities of earth, water, air, fire, ether, um, is a mirror of the heavens, the astral worlds. Um, the senses we experience in the physical world are a mirror of senses we experience in the subtle astral causal worlds. The abilities that we have in the physical world, the limitations that we've been conditioned by, are mirrors of what is possible in the higher worlds of self. So, as creators, then, we become um, enabled to express the higher qualities, the jnanendriyas and kriyandriyas, and you know, the senses are no longer limited as what we know as human, of sight, hearing, touch, taste, and um, smell. We begin to see through the eyes of all creation, every species, every elemental kingdom, every world and dimension, every galaxy beyond. You experience that I am. And then you experience I am all of that. And then you experience that Shiva Shakti, the primordial essence, the formless void, and the dance of creation, the goddess in her vast rapture of multiplicity and beauty, Mahashakti. They're two sides of the same self. So God does not exist outside of creation. Human does not exist separate from God. Nature isn't a physical um, structure or structuring of reality. It's a manifestation of the one self. Just as much as everything within creation, so is everything outside of creation. So this whole idea of within and without vanishes, just dissolves. I am that I am. I am all of this, but not the personal self. The personal self is now blended and dissolved into the universal self. It's experienced as true identity within universal self. But then it becomes a channel. So back again to Rumi's metaphor first, and the drop separate from the ocean. And then the drop merges into the ocean, dissolves its separateness, releases its statement of duality is conditioning around limitation. And then the full power, the full presence, the full activity. So, the Shaiva terms, it's Ichha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. All this then enters through the veils. We recognize that as who we are, the totality of divine presence. And this is what the supramental descent of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother is about. Uh, so the idea of the limited personal self dissolves. The idea of the kanchukas, the chains, the aspects of Maya which keep us bound in illusion begin to fall away. And that's what it means to be an avatar. Um, and it's vibrational. Each of these 36 tattvas has a vibrational quality to it. So earth is a certain vibration. All the elements are a certain vibration. The astral elements has different vibration. Each of our senses is attuned to different levels of vibration, different realms of awareness or dimensions of reality. So as we bring more and more of our presence, that presence which has always existed beyond the Panchukas, beyond the veils of Maya, that presence then begins to permeate through all these different worlds. So that's the journey we're on. This is the supramental descent that's taking place. This is when the highest levels of creative consciousness through the supermind begin to embody through intervening layers of mind, the overmind, the intuitive mind, illumined mind, higher mind, rational mind, into the cellular levels of the mind, into the mind of the cells, the mind of the earth. Now we're entering into the elemental realms of the earth. We're entering into the soul of the earth, Gaia. We're connecting with the soul of the universe, Shakti. So once we begin to experience the connectedness of these things, we can no longer see it as separate. We can no longer see our senses as restricted. We can no longer experience knowledge as limited. We can no longer experience ourselves as isolated or stuck in time and space. And we can no longer experience ourselves as limited in expression or action. We simply experience the totality of divinity, the omniscience, the omnipresence, the omnipotence of God as here and now. So the human self is not identified with its limits anymore. It's not identified with its vibrational field of fear and separation and hopelessness and density and isolation and betrayal and all the stories we've built to protect our hearts and protect our bodies from the fullness of the divine expressing through us. So this then becomes the gateway through which evolution, involution come together in each moment within us. And not just in each moment of linear time, but also in each moment of cosmic time. The pralayas, the creation of universes, the dissolving of universes, big bangs and big blasts, all these things that are so fractally connected with everything there is, along fields and filaments of plasma permeating the entire physical and 13-dimensional universe. So, from all this perspective, we say that the Big Bang is only one tiny um, act of creation. In the later, once the structures are built, um, these higher elements were set in motion. The laws of the universe through the Kanchukas were set into motion for multiplicity and diversity to take place. Then the soul could, or the Paramatman, could incarnate through these self created veils, through the Kanchukas, as a dance of remembrance, of creation and um, recreation. It's funny how those two words are so linked together. So, recognizing ourselves as creation and creator at the same time is what being in avatar consciousness is about. It's what being fully awake means, and what enlightenment means. Um, Once this begins to happen, and it's a process, these things don't happen just like that. It cannot happen just like that because these vibrational fields have to come into resonance, and it takes time. It takes time for a vibrational field of fear and separation to be able to open to the possibilities of going beyond that. It takes time for self identification as limited and fearful dissolve and become alchemically transformed into divinity. So this does take time, but it is happening, and it's happening on many levels for all of us, sometimes consciously, sometimes not so, sometimes in waking states, sometimes in dream states, sometimes in this incarnation, sometimes in between worlds and bardos, um, sometimes on a personal level, sometimes on a collective level. Um, so the tattvas are no longer as distinct or as discrete from each other anymore as the supramental force begins to incarnate through this structure, all these structures of reality. Um, so, yeah, those are some thoughts on creation and the self. Um, in this context, death loses its sting because your identification is no longer with the personal self. The personal self is no longer identified with the physical form. You no longer fear the loss of knowledge or memory or mental, emotional identity. All of these then become interpenetrated. All of these become part of the evolution of the psychic being, starting with the Jivatman, the first entry into the worlds of creation, and then gaining experience lifetime after lifetime, cycle upon cycle, to learn about itself, to recognize itself, ourself, and slowly develop the maturity of the psychic being. And then, as we mature as a psychic being, incarnation after incarnation, those memories, those senses become more and more um, integrated and more available at all times. So then this becomes part of our divinization. Um, so there's already been a divinization, a new earth, the supramental earth, which is a fractal of the supramental universe through a supramentalization of our physical body. The more we supramentalize one physical body, the nature of the supramental force is that it permeates into the collective. It moves through the illusion of separation, the conchicas of time and space, limitation, and then begins to infiltrate, permeate all elements of life, all the 36 elements of creation. It begins to recognize itself in each one. Fractally, they all become mirrors for that one. And then at a certain point, the mirrors just um, fade away and the one remains. You no longer need a mirror because you're fully awake within yourself. Just like in a dream, you no longer mirror yourself in the dream world as other people or things separate from you. You wake up and you're the dreamer. In the same way, Creator wakes up within the tatwas, and I'm aware of myself as that. There's no more personal self. The personal self becomes the channel, and this is the third stage of Rumi. So the drop separate from the ocean, the drop dissolving into the ocean, and then the ocean entering, permeating through the drop to act upon all creation. So there's that initial spark, the intention, Ichha Shakti, then there's the creation of a structure through which this intention can be manifested, and then the act itself, the manifestation, as it proceeds through bodies of matter, through the elemental structures of time and space, through different layers of self-awareness and reality, through full self-awareness that I am that I am. So that last I am is Shiva Shakti. That last I am is simply expressing that being and consciousness cannot be separated from each other. And when that happens, then Ananda, the act of creation, begins. It's like Shakti, the dance, the vibrational frequency of the stillness of Shiva expresses as Shakti permeating through everything that is possible in potential and in manifestation. So this is the alchemy, and this is what Kashmir Shaivism teaches. There's many different layers of understanding of this. There's a dualistic perception where God is separate from humans, separate from the earth. There's hierarchical structures in between. There's forgetfulness. There's boundaries. There's limits, and it's impossible to bridge those. If you're human and you aspire to become God, it's not acceptable. You get stoned, you get nailed to crosses, and so on. So that's the dualistic perspective. Then there's the monotheistic. Well, actually, monotheistic and dualistic can go together. Then there's the Advaita system that recognizes the self within all things, but does not recognize that the world is also part of this. It sees the world as illusion. The world is not real. The world needs to be seen as that. Once you enter into the self and see the illusion of the world, then the world falls away and dissolves. And so in these traditions, Maya is seen as the great illusion. And our job is to see past this veil and enter into that oneness. But here in the Shaivite tradition, this is the third stage of Rumi, the ocean entering into the drop, the supramental force entering deep into the the inconscient, the presence of divine light entering into the mind, creating the mind of light, the body of light, the rainbow body, which becomes multidimensional. Um, so the creation of the rainbow body is a supramentalization of Satchitananda entering into the inconscient, consciously participating with Shakti in the work of evolution, with Gaia, with the Divine Mother, in all scales, in all dimensions. And when we consciously do this, we become Shiva. We recognize our identity as Shiva. We recognize that Shiva, as Parashiva, as primordial consciousness, was never separate from creation, is never separate from creation. And so creation is the crowning glory rather than an illusion. We enter into creation and transform perceptions of duality. We enter into our senses and experience the totality of our senses. We enter into our creative ability and experience the potent realization of who we are, omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. We are all of that, and conscious of being all of that. And this, of course, is a training, it's a development, it's a process. It does not and cannot happen overnight. It does not even happen through lifetimes, but it happens through the ages as new evolution becomes possible, as our genetic codings transform. This is the Gnostic self being created, the Gnostic realization. So the Gnostics recognize, or the monists recognize God within creation, and the way back to recognize this through creation, not by distancing or divorcing or denying aspects of creation, but entering and embracing and becoming creation, recognizing that this is already what we already always have been. So this in summary, is who I am. It's what Kashmir Shaivism is about. In fact, this is what many earlier teachers from that region were trying to explore and teach. And that became the basis for many of the teachings that then later permeated all of India and around the world. I've spoken also about the Nath tradition, the taking of the rainbow body, the yogis and the lamas who develop this awareness of the self through the multiplicity of creation, and within the multiplicity of creation. And then the body is no longer limited by any of the Kanchukas. We're not limited in time and space. And therefore we can move the body around just like consciousness moves around. Who I am is multi-dimensional, omnipresent, and therefore I'm no longer limited in time and space in this dimension of experience either. That's the rainbow body. The rainbow body can pick up and move around in time and space instantaneously. We're not limited in terms of ideas and knowledge. We can access anything we wish from any species, any dimension, any world, any time, by simply attuning to that through these different levels of the mind. So higher mind, illumined, intuitive, overmind, supermind. We develop a bridge between these minds, all operating through the rational conscious mind, entering into the mind of Gaia through the mind of the cells, into the inconscient, which is the womb of creation, potentizing new possibilities and jumpstarting new levels of evolution. So, as we wake up to ourselves, to who we are within creation, we become an agent for creation. We become tuned and unified with Gaia. Um, all possibilities exist within this. There's no lack, there's no ignorance. Um, we can achieve anything we wish that comes from this state of recognition. And this is how evolution takes place. We are part of Gaia. We are not separate from Gaia. I'm speaking of the personal human self. And we are the neuronal aspects of Gaia. Through us as human family, she is an elemental force, works with the Shakti of these tattvas to remember herself and to create new modes of expression, new cycles of evolution. The galactic superwaves coming through, the solar micronova taking place, magnetic excursions and reversals that periodically take place on our planet. All of this is part of this activity of new creation, of dissolution, of recovery and return, of maintenance and rebirth. So the difference is that now we do this consciously. I am no longer unconscious, separate, limited. I am now conscious, awake, and creatively, divinely potent. I'm aware of myself as alive. I'm aware of awareness as creator. And this is what makes me present. So this is my current understandings and attempts to integrate integral yoga with Kashmir Shaivism, with Advaita, with science, with a pragmatic attitude to how I can be present on this earth where I'm placed now to help make this earth a better place, to help Gaia in her evolutionary journey, to recognize ourselves as Earth humans, as part of a larger galactic family, to recognize ourselves in this dimension as multidimensional and co-conscious with infinite other realms of creation, and creating bridges along the way. Bridges between the tattvas, bridges between the different aspects of our being, until we recognize that I am omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, just as much within this body of creation as beyond, just as much within this moment of awareness as in the great cosmic cycle of infinity and life. Creation begins, sustains, and ends in each moment of time, as well as in the moments beyond time. So once we recognize that all 36 tattvas are not just aspects of divinity expressed in the vast universe out there, but also the vast universe in here, that it's an exact replica. As above, so below. I am that, this I am. Creator and creation recognize themselves in the mirror. Separation dissolves. That is perhaps what being awake means. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity to explore these relationships and to share them and recognize that in truth, as we become aware of various levels and reflections of this one truth, we also become aware of the power of expression and manifestation and creation. And this is wisdom. It comes from a place of connection, connectedness, which is love. Who I am is love. And again, back to Rumi. God is love, lover and beloved, in every aspect of itself expressed and experienced through every aspect of creation. And since I am fractally and holographically connected with that, I am love. And that presence of love can flow through this form, this individualized structure, this jivatman, this psychic being. As an avatar. And an avatar is simply what? Go back to that movie, Avatar. It's the ability to hold and to reflect and manifest the connectedness of all life. Pandora, remember, is the interconnectedness of all life, all species, all intelligences, all moments. Aiva, Aiva, Shakti, Shiva, Self, Pandora. It's all the same. The age of Pandora begins now. It's time to open that box, that magic box given to the maiden in the Greek myth, Pandora. To open it now to the hope that lies within, that is hidden inside, so it can be revealed. And these secrets of revelation are there within the tatwas. In a right understanding of the tattvas and how they relate to the passage we're making now, to this momentum that's being built in the return journey, in the return back from this cycle of Kali Yuga, Dwapara, Treta, back to Satya Yuga. And when we talk about Satyuga, we're talking about Sat, truth, also. So we're also talking about Satchitananda, primordial awareness, here and now present within creation. Satchitananda. Ananda is the expression, the totality of that creative awareness. It's the recognition of our divine potency. And then it's a celebration of this divinity in every realm of activity. Namaste. That which is in me is in you. That which I am, we all are. Aho.